My name is Lydia Andrews, and I just turned 34 last week. No one remembered my birthday except my assistant, Jane. I never thought I would be sitting in this cold lawyer's office watching my world collapse for the second time in 3 years. First, I lost Mom to cancer. Now Dad is gone too, leaving nothing but his final words on paper: "Everything goes to your sister." Allison smiled at me from across the table, but she had no idea what Mom secretly left me before she died. Dad's betrayal hurt, but Mom's love was stronger than his rejection. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt betrayed by family, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I discovered that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's written in a will. I grew up in a beautiful Georgian mansion in Boston's Beacon Hill neighborhood. The Andrews family name carried weight in social circles, something my father Richard never let us forget. My earliest memories are filled with the scent of Mom's perfume as she read me bedtime stories and the distant sound of Dad's business calls echoing through our cavernous home. Mom Catherine was everything warm and nurturing. Her long auburn hair often pulled into an elegant twist, her green eyes crinkling when she smiled. She understood me in ways no one else did. When I showed interest in drawing at age 6, she converted a sunny corner of our library into a mini art studio. While other mothers in our social circle shipped their creative children off to practical extracurriculars, Mom encouraged me to follow my passion. "Your imagination is a gift, Lydia," she would say, watching me sketch for hours. "Never let anyone convince you it isn't valuable." Dad couldn't have been more different. Richard Andrews built his investment firm from scratch, turning it into one of Boston's most respected financial institutions. Tall, imposing, with salt and pepper hair perfectly trimmed, he demanded excellence in everything. His crisp suits never had a wrinkle, his schedule never a minute wasted. Business dinners, golf with clients, and conference calls dominated his life. Then there was my older sister, Allison. 3 years my senior, she was Dad's pride from the beginning. While I inherited Mom's artistic sensibilities and auburn hair, Allison was Dad's carbon copy, ambitious, practical, and calculating. She excelled in math and economics, joined the debate team, and planned her future in finance before she even started high school. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Allison turned 16, Dad surprised her with a brand new BMW. When my 16th birthday came around, I received a practical watch and a lecture about responsibility. When Allison was accepted to Dad's alma mater, Harvard Business School, he threw an elaborate party with business associates and family friends. When I was accepted to Parsons School of Design in New York, he frowned and asked, "Are you sure that's a wise investment?" "Art won't pay the bills, Lydia," became his mantra whenever we discussed my future. "It's a hobby, not a career." Mom would intervene during these tense discussions. "Richard, Lydia has real talent. Not everyone needs to follow your path to be successful." Their disagreements about my future were frequent but hushed often behind closed doors. Mom was the buffer between Dad's harsh expectations and my creative aspirations. One memory stands out vividly. I was 14, sketching in our backyard garden, when Allison came home celebrating her perfect SAT scores. Dad immediately called his friends to share the news, popping champagne in the middle of the afternoon. I continued sketching, trying to become invisible. Later that evening, Mom found me still in the garden, now drawing by lantern light. "Your father loves you, Lydia," she said softly, sitting beside me. "He just doesn't understand people who think differently than him." She pulled out a vintage silver locket from her pocket, oval-shaped with intricate engravings of lilies, my favorite flower. Inside was a tiny family photo taken when I was about 5, one of the few where Dad was genuinely smiling. "This has been passed down through generations of Andrews women," she explained. "My grandmother gave it to my mother, who gave it to me. One day it will be yours." "But shouldn't it go to Allison?" I asked. "She's the oldest." Mom smiled and clasped the locket around her neck. "Some treasures aren't meant to follow conventional paths, just like some people." Throughout high school, the division in our family grew more pronounced. Allison shadowed Dad at his office during summers, while I took art classes and volunteered at local galleries. Dad invested in Allison's first stock portfolio when she was 17. When I asked for money to attend a prestigious summer art program, he refused, calling it throwing good money after bad. Mom secretly paid for it from her personal account. College only widened the gap. Allison thrived at Harvard, joining investment clubs and securing prestigious internships with Dad's connections. I flourished at Parsons, developing my own artistic style and making friends who valued creativity. During holiday breaks, dinner conversations revolved around Allison's achievements, with my art education treated as an amusing diversion. "So you're paying thousands of dollars to learn how to draw?" Dad would ask, not hiding his disapproval. "I'm studying graphic design, illustration, and digital media." I would correct him, my voice growing smaller each time. Mom would quickly change the subject later, slipping into my room to see my latest projects, genuinely interested in my progress. The Christmas before my final year of college, I overheard my parents arguing in Dad's study. "She needs to grow up, Catherine." Dad's voice was sharp. "Art is fine for children, but Lydia needs to join the real world." "The real world needs artists too, Richard," Mom countered. "Not everyone measures success by their bank account." "When I'm gone, who will take care of her? Her finger paintings won't pay the mortgage." "She's more capable than you give her credit for," Mom said firmly, "and I've made my own arrangements." I didn't understand what she meant then. It would be years before I discovered the significance of those words. After graduation, Allison joined a prestigious investment bank in London, quickly climbing the corporate ladder. I stayed in New York working freelance design jobs while building my portfolio. Dad didn't hide his disappointment when I declined his offer to find me a real job at his company. Mom was my constant supporter, calling weekly to check on me, visiting New York whenever she could. During one visit, she brought a small package. "Something to brighten up your apartment," she said. Inside was a beautiful watercolor set with professional brushes. Tucked underneath was an envelope with $5,000 cash. "Mom, I can't take this," I protested. "It's my money, Lydia," she said firmly. "Your father doesn't control everything." Looking back, I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why my gentle, accommodating mother had secrets from her husband of 35 years. But I was young, focused on my own struggles, unaware of the storm approaching our family. The foundation of everything I understood about my family was about to crumble, beginning with a single phone call that changed everything. The call came on a rainy Tuesday in April. Mom's voice sounded strange, strained in a way I'd never heard before. "The doctor found something, sweetheart," she said, her usual warmth dampened by something I couldn't yet name. "Could you come home this weekend?" The something turned out to be stage 4 pancreatic cancer. By the time they caught it, the disease had already spread to her liver. The prognosis was grim, 6 months at best. I packed up my apartment in New York within days, putting my budding career on hold. My tiny freelance design business would have to wait. Mom needed me, and for once in my life, I would be the one someone in my family relied on. Dad retreated into his work, spending longer hours at the office as Mom grew weaker. Perhaps that was his way of coping, or perhaps he simply couldn't bear to watch his wife fade away. Allison called regularly from London, but cited important deals and client commitments when Mom suggested she visit. "Your sister has responsibilities." Mom defended her, though I could see the hurt in her eyes. "Not everyone can put their life on pause like you have." It wasn't said as criticism, but the words stung nonetheless. I had responsibilities too, clients, deadlines, rent. The difference was, I chose Mom over all of that without hesitation. The months that followed were a blur of doctor appointments, medication schedules, and quiet nights watching Mom's favorite classic films together. I learned to administer her pain medication, to recognize when she needed rest, even when she insisted she was fine, to make her favorite foods in smaller portions as her appetite waned. Dad would come home late, ask how she was doing, then retreat to his study with a glass of scotch. We rarely spoke beyond necessary exchanges about Mom's care. Once I tried to bridge the gap. "She misses you during the day," I said one evening as he checked his emails. "Someone has to keep this family afloat," he replied without looking up. "Medical bills don't pay themselves." I bit back a retort about health insurance and his millions in savings. This wasn't the time for another battle in our ongoing war. As Mom grew weaker, Allison finally flew home for a weekend visit. She spent most of it on her laptop in the guest room, emerging only for brief visits with Mom and mandatory family dinners. During one such dinner, Dad asked about her recent promotion. "The youngest vice president in the company's history," he announced proudly, pouring her more wine, "following in your old man's footsteps." "It's nothing special," Allison said with false modesty. "Just putting in the hours." "Nonsense. It's the Andrews business sense. You can't teach that." I focused on helping Mom with her food, ignoring the familiar dynamic. Later that night, as I adjusted Mom's pillows, she took my hand. "You know what I'm proudest of," she whispered. "Your compassion. That's something no promotion can measure." And 2 days before Mom died, she asked for a private moment with me. Her body had withered, but her green eyes remained bright alert. "I need you to listen carefully," she said, her voice barely audible. "In my jewelry box there's an envelope with a key and instructions. After I'm gone, keep it somewhere safe. Don't tell your father or Allison." "Mom, what is this about?" I asked, alarmed by her secretive tone. "Insurance," she said with a small smile. "For your future. Promise me you'll follow the instructions when the time is right." I promised, though I didn't understand. That night, while Dad worked late and Allison took a business call, I found the envelope. Inside was a small key and a piece of paper with Kwang So 247 First Boston Trust Dung Beacon written in Mom's elegant handwriting. The next day she slipped into a coma. She was gone within 24 hours, her hand in mine as she took her final breath. Dad arrived 10 minutes too late, having stopped to wrap up a conference call. Allison made it for the funeral, dry-eyed and efficient, handling arrangements with the funeral home while I sat numbly beside Mom's favorite roses. After the funeral, the house felt unbearably empty. Dad buried himself deeper in work, sometimes not coming home for days. Allison returned to London after a perfunctory week of helping sort Mom's clothes for donation. "You should come visit sometime," she said at the airport, not quite meeting my eyes. "London has great museums." We both knew it was an empty invitation. I tried to connect with Dad in the months that followed cooking dinner when he was home asking about his day. His responses grew increasingly terse, sometimes just a nod or grunt. One evening after a particularly difficult day, I broke down. "Why can't you just talk to me?" I pleaded. "We're both hurting. We could help each other." He looked at me, then really looked at me for the first time since Mom died, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was nothing. Empty indifference. "You look too much like her," he said finally. "Every time I see you, I see Catherine." He left for a business trip the next day. When he returned, I had moved back to New York. There seemed no point in staying where I wasn't wanted. I took Mom's envelope with me, tucking it into my most precious sketchbook for safekeeping. Over the next 3 years, our relationship deteriorated further. Birthday cards with impersonal gift cards. Christmas calls that lasted under 5 minutes. I rebuilt my freelance business, creating branding packages for small businesses and illustrations for digital publications. It wasn't lucrative, but it was mine, built without Dad's connections or money. I kept Mom's key and note, not quite understanding their purpose, but unwilling to break my promise. Sometimes I would take them out, trace the writing with my finger, and wonder what insurance Mom thought I needed. But life moved on, and the mystery remained, just another unresolved thread in the tapestry of my complicated family. Until the day Dad's assistant called to tell me he had suffered a massive stroke. Mr. Andrews collapsed during a board meeting yesterday afternoon. His assistant, Jennifer, explained, her voice professional but gentle. "The doctors say it was a severe stroke. He's stable but in a coma at Massachusetts General." I caught the first train from New York to Boston, my mind racing with contradictory emotions. Despite our estrangement, he was still my father. The thought of him lying helpless in a hospital bed was devastating. Yet a small wounded part of me wondered if he would even want me there. When I arrived at the hospital, Allison was already in Dad's private room typing on her laptop. She had cut her hair since I'd last seen her, now a sleek bob that framed her face perfectly. Her charcoal suit probably cost more than my rent, and diamonds glittered at her ears and wrist. "Finally decided to show up," she said without looking away from her screen. "I came as soon as I heard," I replied, moving past her to Dad's bedside. He looked smaller, somehow vulnerable beneath the white hospital sheets. Various machines beeped steadily, monitoring his vital signs. I gently touched his hand, shocked by how cold it felt. "Has he woken up at all?" I asked. "No." Allison closed her laptop with a snap. "The doctors don't know if he will. Brain damage from the stroke was extensive." Her clinical tone made me flinch. "Have you been here all night?" "Someone had to be," she replied. "I flew in from London immediately. The company sent the jet." The implication hung in the air, that I, living just hours away, should have somehow arrived before her. I bit back a retort about not being informed until this morning. Fighting wouldn't help Dad. "I can stay tonight," I offered. "You should get some rest." "Already arranged for a private nurse," she said, standing and smoothing her skirt. "But suit yourself. I have meetings with Dad's executive team about interim leadership. His company can't run itself." And with that, she was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of expensive perfume. I settled into the chair beside Dad's bed, taking his hand in mine. "Hi, Dad," I said softly. "It's Lydia. I'm here." The following week fell into an uncomfortable routine. Allison would arrive each morning in a different designer outfit, laptop and coffee in hand, spend a few hours working beside Dad's bed, then leave for meetings at his office. I would come in the afternoon bringing flowers to brighten the sterile room, reading to him from the newspaper, or just sitting quietly sketching to pass the time. We rarely overlapped, and when we did, conversation was minimal. Allison seemed to view my presence as an inconvenience, while I found her business-as-usual approach callous. The private nurse she'd hired, Maria, was the only buffer between us. "Your father is lucky to have 2 daughters who care so much," Maria said one evening, clearly trying to bridge the gap. Allison looked up from her spreadsheet with a tight smile. "Some of us show we care by ensuring his life's work doesn't collapse while he's ill." I ignored the barb, focusing instead on adjusting Dad's blanket. On the 5th night, I decided to stay late after Allison left. Something about the quietness of the hospital after visiting hours made it easier to talk to Dad, even if he couldn't hear me. "Remember that fishing trip when I was 12? I said, holding his hand. "Just the 2 of us at Lake Winnipesaukee. You taught me how to cast properly, and we caught that huge bass together. You were so proud you took a photo and kept it in your wallet." I paused, blinking back tears. "That was a good day, wasn't it? I miss those days, Dad. I miss when things weren't so complicated between us." I continued talking, reminiscing about family vacations, Christmas mornings, even the driving lessons that had ended in arguments, but now seemed precious. Around midnight, I dozed off in the chair beside his bed, still holding his hand. A slight pressure on my fingers woke me. Dad's eyes were open, looking directly at me. "Dad," I gasped, immediately alert. "Can you hear me?" His lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. His fingers twitched in mine. "I'll get the nurse," I said, reaching for the call button. Before I could press it, his grip tightened fractionally, and his eyes locked with mine. There was something in that gaze. Recognition, confusion, perhaps regret. I couldn't be sure. Then his eyes drifted shut again, his hand going slack in mine. When the doctors came, they said it was a good sign that he'd regained consciousness briefly, but cautioned against too much optimism. Brain injuries were unpredictable, they explained. I called Allison immediately, but her assistant said she was in an important dinner with investors and couldn't be disturbed. She arrived the next morning freshly coiffed and irritated that I hadn't insisted the message be delivered. "Did he say anything?" she demanded. "No," I admitted, "but he seemed to recognize me." Allison's mouth tightened. "Well, let's hope he wakes up again when someone who can actually make medical decisions is present." The barb hit home. As the elder child and the one Dad had appointed as his healthcare proxy, Allison had full legal authority over his treatment. I was merely a visitor despite the blood we shared. Dad never did wake up again. 3 days later, his heart gave out in the early hours of the morning. I wasn't there. I'd gone back to my hotel to shower and change. By the time I got the call and rushed to the hospital, he was already gone. Allison stood at the window of his room, phone pressed to her ear, informing someone about necessary arrangements. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral preparations. Allison took charge, of course, consulting me only perfunctorily about details. The service was large and formal, attended mostly by Dad's business associates. Speaker after speaker praised his business acumen, his strategic mind, his legacy in the financial world. I sat in the front row feeling strangely disconnected from the man they described. Where was the father who had taught me to ride a bike? Who had once built me a treehouse, albeit while explaining the tax benefits of home improvements? It seemed in death as in life, Richard Andrews, the businessman, had eclipsed Richard Andrews, the father. After the funeral, Allison informed me that the family lawyer wanted to meet with both of us the following morning to discuss the will. "Try to look presentable," she added, eyeing my simple black dress. "Harold Patterson is old-fashioned." As I returned to my hotel room that night, I felt utterly alone. Both my parents were gone, and my only sibling was practically a stranger. Tomorrow would bring the final chapter of my relationship with Dad, the reading of his will. Given our history, I had few illusions about what it might contain. Little did I know that the next day would change everything, not because of what Dad had left behind, but because of what Mom had prepared years earlier. The offices of Patterson, Winters & Associates occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building with views of Boston Harbor. The reception area featured leather seating, dark wood paneling, and discreet lighting that whispered of old money and discretion. I arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in the best outfit I'd brought, a navy blazer over a cream blouse and matching slacks. Professional, but understated. Allison swept in exactly on time, turning heads in a blood-red designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and diamonds sparkled at her ears and throat. "At least you're punctual," she murmured, barely glancing at me as the receptionist led us to a conference room. Harold Patterson was waiting for us, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and tortoiseshell glasses. He'd been Dad's lawyer and friend for over 30 years, handling everything from business contracts to personal affairs. I'd met him at various family events over the years, though he'd always paid more attention to Allison as Dad's obvious successor. "Allison Lydia," he greeted us, shaking our hands. "Please accept my deepest condolences. Your father was not only a valued client but a dear friend." "Thank you, Harold," Allison replied smoothly, taking a seat at the polished conference table. "We appreciate you handling this promptly." I sat opposite her, feeling like an outsider at my own father's will reading. Mr. Patterson arranged several documents before him, his expression professionally neutral. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to express that it has been my privilege to serve your family for many years. I worked with your father to ensure his final wishes were legally documented and will be properly executed." Allison nodded impatiently. "Of course. Shall we proceed?" "Certainly." Mr. Patterson opened a leather portfolio and removed an official-looking document. "I'll read the relevant portions of your father's last will and testament, executed 14 months ago." He cleared his throat and began reading in a formal tone. "I, Richard James Andrews, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils." He continued through various legal formalities before reaching the distribution of assets. My stomach tightened as he approached the key provisions. "Regarding the distribution of my estate," Mr. Patterson read, "I hereby bequeath all my property, both real and personal, including but not limited to my primary residence at 47 Acorn Street, Boston, Massachusetts, my vacation properties in Nantucket and Aspen, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, stock holdings, and business interests, all vehicles, artwork, jewelry, and personal effects, and any other assets I may own at the time of my death to my daughter Allison Catherine Andrews." He paused, looking up briefly before continuing. "To my daughter Lydia Elizabeth Andrews, I leave my sincere wishes for success in her artistic endeavors." That was it. Nothing else. No explanation, no token bequest, not even a personal message, just a perfunctory acknowledgement of my existence and dismissal of my worth. The room seemed to tilt slightly as the reality sank in. Dad had cut me out completely. I became aware of Allison's eyes on me, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of her perfectly painted lips. She'd won. Not that there had ever really been a competition in Dad's eyes. "Is that everything?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Mr. Patterson looked uncomfortable for the first time. "Yes, that constitutes the entirety of the inheritance provisions. There are standard administrative clauses that follow, but nothing that affects the distribution." "I see." I fought to keep my voice steady. "And this is legal, to completely disinherit one child. In Massachusetts, a testator has the right to distribute their assets as they see fit, barring certain provisions for spouses," the lawyer explained gently. "I understand this may come as a shock." "It's hardly a shock," Allison interrupted. "Dad always said he wouldn't reward irresponsibility. Lydia chose her path knowing the consequences." The casual cruelty of her words felt like a physical blow. I stood abruptly, needing to escape before I broke down. "If there's nothing else, I should go," I said, gathering my purse. "Actually, there are documents for both of you to sign," Mr. Patterson said, looking relieved to return to procedural matters. "Acknowledgement of notification and receipts for any personal items you may take." "What personal items would those be?" I asked bitterly, since apparently everything belongs to Allison now. "Lydia." Allison sighed dramatically. "Don't make this difficult. I'm sure there are some childhood mementos or whatever that you can have. I'm not unreasonable." Her condescension was the final straw. Without another word, I signed where Mr. Patterson indicated and walked out, ignoring his awkward goodbye and Allison's triumphant expression. I made it to the elevator before the tears started. As the doors closed, I leaned against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was the final confirmation that my father had never valued me, never believed in me, never thought I was worthy of even the smallest part of his legacy. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't notice Allison had followed me until the lobby elevator doors opened, and she stepped in, preventing them from closing with a manicured hand. "That was quite the dramatic exit," she said, following me as I walked briskly toward the building exit. "Leave me alone, Allison." "Oh, come on, don't act so surprised." She kept pace with me easily in her designer heels. "You spent years disappointing him with your artistic delusions. What did you expect?" I stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "I expected basic human decency from my father, and from you." "This is decency," she countered. "He worked his entire life to build something meaningful, something lasting. Why would he hand half of it to someone who never showed any interest or aptitude for preserving it?" "Is that what you tell yourself?" I asked. "That this was about preserving his legacy, not about control or punishment or your manipulation?" Her smile was cold. "Think whatever makes you feel better. The fact remains that I'm the executor of his estate now, and you're—" She glanced pointedly at my modest outfit. "Clearly struggling. If you need a job, I might have something suitable. Personal assistant, perhaps. At least it would be steady income." The insult was so blatant that I actually laughed. "Goodbye, Allison." As I walked away, she called after me, "Your art dream's not working out as planned. Reality finally setting in. Dad was right about you all along." I didn't look back. Outside, the bright spring sunshine felt like a mockery of my dark mood. I walked aimlessly for several blocks, trying to clear my head. Eventually, I found myself in a small park, sitting on a bench, staring at the children playing nearby. What now? I had a return ticket to New York for tomorrow, a half-finished freelance project due next week, and an apartment I could barely afford. Dad's betrayal hurt deeply, but it changed nothing practical about my situation. I would go on as before, just with one more emotional wound to carry. As I sat there, a memory surfaced. Mom's voice weak but determined. "Insurance for your future." The key and the note. First Boston Trust. All this time I'd kept my promise to keep them safe, not knowing what they meant. Now perhaps it was time to find out. After a restless night at my hotel, I woke early the next morning with a sense of purpose. I retrieved Mom's envelope from my suitcase where I'd packed it as an afterthought, not expecting to need it. The small key gleamed in the morning light, and the note with its cryptic message seemed to hold new significance. First Boston Trust was located on Beacon Street, a stately building of granite and glass. I entered the polished lobby, suddenly conscious of my casual attire among the well-dressed bankers and clients. At the information desk, a receptionist with a perfect blonde updo looked up expectantly. "May I help you?" "I hope so," I replied, producing the key and note. "My mother left me this. I believe it's for a safety deposit box here." She examined the note and nodded. "Safe deposit box 247. Do you have identification?" After verifying my identity, she led me to a secure area in the back of the bank. A manager was called to assist with accessing the vault. The process was formal and deliberate, signing forms presenting ID again following security protocols. Box 247 was rented by Catherine Andrews. The manager confirmed, checking his records. "You're listed as the authorized accessor in the event of her death. We'll need a few minutes to retrieve it." While waiting, I wondered what could be so important that Mom had arranged this elaborate secrecy. Tax documents. Family heirlooms. Whatever it was, she hadn't wanted Dad or Allison to know about it. The manager returned with a long metal box and led me to a private viewing room. "Take your time," he said, closing the door behind him. The key slid into the lock smoothly. Inside the box was a smaller wooden case, beautifully crafted from cherry wood with my initials, Leah, inlaid in mother of pearl. I traced the letters with my finger, recognizing Mom's attention to detail in the choice. I opened the wooden case carefully. On top lay Mom's silver locket, the family heirloom she'd shown me years ago in the garden. Beneath it was a thick manila envelope and a sealed letter with my name written in Mom's elegant handwriting. I opened the letter first, my hands trembling slightly. "My dearest Lydia, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and the time has come for you to know the truth. I've always known that your father and sister would never truly understand or appreciate your beautiful spirit and talents. While I couldn't change their minds, I could prepare for a future where you would need protection from their dismissal. What you'll find in the enclosed documents may surprise you. 10 years ago, I inherited a modest sum from my Aunt Eleanor. Instead of adding it to the family accounts as your father expected, I secretly invested in a small art publishing company called Artemis Press. Over the years, I've guided this investment through a separate legal entity, watching it grow into a successful enterprise. The company specializes in art books, prints, and now digital design services, all areas aligned with your passions. Artemis Press is now worth approximately $50 million, and as the documents will show, it belongs entirely to you. I've arranged everything legally through a separate attorney, Julia Martinez, whose contact information is included. She has managed this matter with complete discretion and will help you take control of your inheritance. I never told your father about this, not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I knew he would never understand that I was creating a safety net for you. Allison has always had his support and will inherit his fortune. You deserved security too, on your own terms. The locket is yours now as promised. Wear it and remember that I believed in you completely. Your creativity isn't a liability. It's your greatest strength. Live the life you want, Lydia. Create beauty. Help others find their voice. And know that wherever I am, I'm proud of the woman you've become. All my love, Mom. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter. Even from beyond the grave, Mom had found a way to protect me, to ensure I wouldn't be left vulnerable to Dad's disapproval or Allison's condescension. I fastened the locket around my neck, feeling a connection to her that transcended death. With shaking hands, I opened the manila envelope. Inside were legal documents confirming everything in the letter. Stock certificates showing ownership of Artemis Press Publishing transferred to a trust in my name. Financial statements showing steady growth and impressive profit margins. A business overview revealing that what had started as a small art book publisher had expanded into digital media, online education, and creative services. A perfect match for my skills and interests. Also included was a business card for Julia Martinez, attorney at law, with a handwritten note, "Call me when you're ready to take the reins." I sat in the viewing room for nearly an hour, absorbing the magnitude of what Mom had done. While Dad had been grooming Allison as his successor, Mom had quietly built a legacy for me, one that honored my strengths rather than trying to remold me into someone else's image. As I carefully repacked the documents, a plan began forming in my mind. Allison thought yesterday's will reading was the final act of our family drama. She had no idea that the real story was just beginning. I took out my phone and dialed the number on Julia Martinez's card. It was time to claim my inheritance, and perhaps balance the scales of justice that had been tipped against me for so long. "Ms. Andrews, I'm Jessica Morgan." The woman extended her hand across the polished desk. "Julia Martinez referred your case to me as she's recently been appointed to the judiciary. I specialize in inheritance law and complex estate matters." 2 days after discovering Mom's secret, I sat in a sunlit office overlooking Boston Common. Jessica Morgan was younger than I expected, perhaps early 40s, with sharp eyes behind stylish glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor that instantly put me at ease. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice," I replied, shaking her hand. "Julia briefed me thoroughly," Jessica said, opening a folder. "Your mother created quite an impressive safety net for you, very forward-thinking and absolutely bulletproof legally." "That's reassuring," I said. "I've brought everything from the safety deposit box." I placed the documents on her desk, and she reviewed them methodically, occasionally making notes. Finally, she looked up with a satisfied expression. "Your mother was meticulous. The trust was properly established, all taxes paid, complete separation from family assets maintained. There's nothing your sister or your father's estate could claim here." Relief washed over me. "So what happens now?" "That depends on what you want," Jessica replied, leaning forward. "You're the sole owner of a very successful company. You could sell it and walk away with a substantial fortune. You could maintain ownership but hire management to run it. Or you could take an active role yourself." I hadn't considered all these options. I'd need time to decide that, but first there's something else I'd like your help with. "Of course. My sister doesn't know about any of this. After the way she behaved at the will reading, I want to—" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "You want to reveal your inheritance in a way that makes an impact," Jessica suggested with a knowing smile. "Exactly." I felt a flush of embarrassment at the admission. It seemed petty, but after years of Allison's smugness and Dad's dismissal, I craved this small revenge. "I completely understand," Jessica assured me, "and I have some ideas about how to handle this. First, let's review your father's will to understand exactly what your sister has inherited." We spent the next hour dissecting Dad's estate and planning my approach. Jessica explained that while I couldn't contest Dad's will without grounds like undue influence or mental incapacity, I could certainly make Allison aware of my own substantial inheritance in a legally protected manner. I suggest arranging a meeting in a public place, Jessica advised. Present the facts calmly. If she reacts negatively or threatens legal action, having witnesses can be advantageous. She'll be furious, I mused. She always hated not being in control. Let her be furious. There's nothing she can do about it, Jessica replied confidently. Your mother's arrangements are airtight, but I'd like to be present at this meeting if you don't mind, just to ensure everything remains civil and to address any legal questions immediately. I agreed readily, grateful for the support. We scheduled the meeting for the following day at an upscale cafe near Boston Common, public enough to discourage a scene, but quiet enough for a private conversation. That evening I called Allison. "What is it, Lydia? I'm rather busy settling Dad's affairs," she answered, barely hiding her impatience. "I need to speak with you before I return to New York," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "It's important." "If this is about reconsidering Dad's will—" "It's not," I interrupted. "But it is about family matters. Can you meet me at Westfield Cafe tomorrow at 11? After some reluctance, she agreed. I spent the night rehearsing what I would say, how I would react to her inevitable shock and anger. For once, I would be the one in control of the situation. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. Jessica was already there, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, seated at a corner table with good visibility, but some privacy. I joined her, trying to calm my nerves. "Remember," she said quietly, "you have nothing to apologize for. This was your mother's choice, and her right." Allison arrived exactly at 11 punctuality, being one of the few traits we shared. She spotted me immediately and walked over her Louboutins, clicking on the hardwood floor. Her expression soured when she noticed Jessica. "I thought this was a private conversation," she said, remaining standing. "Allison, this is Jessica Morgan, my attorney," I explained. "Please sit down." "Your attorney?" Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "What could you possibly need an attorney for?" "That's what I'd like to discuss," I replied, gesturing to the empty chair. "Coffee." Reluctantly, Allison sat, declining the offered coffee with a dismissive wave. "I only have 30 minutes before my next meeting. What's this about?" I took a deep breath. "I wanted to let you know that I'll be staying in Boston longer than planned. I've decided to take a more active role in managing my inheritance." Allison's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "What inheritance did you misunderstand, Harold, yesterday? Dad left you nothing but good wishes." "Dad did," I agreed calmly. "But Mom had other plans." I opened the folder Jessica had prepared and slid it across the table. "Mom left me Artemis Press Publishing. It's worth approximately $50 million now." Allison's face froze, her hand hovering over the documents. "That's impossible. Mom didn't have that kind of money." "She started with a modest inheritance from her aunt," I explained. "She invested wisely and built something substantial over the past decade." Without telling Dad, without telling me, Allison snatched up the papers, scanning them rapidly. "This can't be legal." "I assure you it's entirely legal," Jessica interjected smoothly. "Mrs. Andrews established the company through her separate property, maintained proper corporate formalities, and paid all applicable taxes. The transfer of ownership to Ms. Lydia Andrews was properly executed through a living trust." "This is absurd," Allison hissed, still flipping through the documents. "Mom was a housewife, not a business mogul." "She was more than you ever gave her credit for," I replied. "Just like I am." Allison's face flushed with anger. "You think this changes anything? Dad's estate is worth 10 times this amount. I'm still the executor of his will, still in charge of the family legacy." "I'm not interested in Dad's legacy," I said truthfully. "I'm interested in honoring Mom's belief in me. Artemis Press aligns perfectly with my skills and interests. I plan to lead it myself." "You," Allison scoffed, "run a multi-million-dollar company that's rich. You can barely manage your little freelance gigs." "Ms. Andrews," Jessica cut in, her tone polite but firm, "your sister is the legal owner of a thriving business with an experienced management team already in place. Her qualifications are not at issue here." Allison ignored her, leaning toward me. "What do you really want?" "Lydia, is this about extracting some concession from Dad's estate? Because if so, I don't want anything from Dad's estate," I interrupted. "I'm simply informing you of my plans to remain in Boston while I transition into leadership at Artemis Press. As family, I thought you should know." "How considerate!" Allison's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And what makes you think you can just waltz into a company and take over? The existing management might have something to say about that." "Actually," Jessica interjected again, "the current CEO, Marcus Williams, has been fully briefed. He was appointed by Mrs. Catherine Andrews with the understanding that Ms. Lydia would eventually assume control. He's looking forward to facilitating the transition." This was another surprise to me, though I didn't let it show. Mom had truly thought of everything. Allison's composure cracked further. "This is ridiculous. Mom would never go behind Dad's back like this." "She did it to protect me," I said quietly, "because she knew you and Dad would leave me with nothing." "Oh, please, don't play the victim," Allison snapped. "You chose your path. If you'd shown any interest in the family business—" "Not everyone measures success by the same metrics, Allison," I interrupted. "Mom understood that. She valued my creativity instead of trying to force me into a mold that didn't fit." Allison's eyes narrowed as she absorbed my words. Then she let out a short, humorless laugh. "So that's what this meeting is really about. Gloating. Proving you weren't the family failure after all." Her words stung, but I maintained my composure. "No, it's about letting you know that Mom ensured I would be okay, despite Dad's final rejection. I don't need your pity or your assistance." "Well, isn't that convenient?" Allison stood abruptly. "Play the struggling artist for years, then suddenly inherit a company you've done nothing to build or deserve." "Mrs. Andrews built this company specifically for her daughter," Jessica stated firmly. "Her intentions were clear and legally executed." Allison ignored her again, gathering her designer purse. "This changes nothing between us, Lydia. You're still the same impractical dreamer you've always been. Having money won't change that." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "You know what the difference is between us, Allison? You were handed everything and told you deserved it. I was given nothing and told I wasn't worth it. Now we'll see which of us truly understands the value of what we have." She froze for a moment, then continued walking without looking back. As the cafe door closed behind her, I exhaled slowly, feeling simultaneously drained and relieved. "That went about as expected," Jessica observed, closing her folder. "Actually, it went better than I thought," I admitted. "I was prepared for her to make a scene." "She's too controlled for that," Jessica noted. "But she'll regroup and may try other approaches. If she contacts you with any legal threats or proposals, refer her directly to me." I nodded, fingering the locket around my neck. "What now?" "Now," Jessica smiled. "We schedule a meeting with Marcus Williams and begin your transition into leadership at Artemis Press. Your mother left you more than money, Lydia. She left you a purpose. It's time to claim it." As we gathered our things to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. Mom's final gift wasn't just financial security. It was validation of the path I'd chosen and the courage to follow it without apology. For the first time since her death, I felt truly connected to her, carrying forward not just her locket, but her vision and faith in me. Allison might have Dad's fortune, but I had something far more precious, a legacy built on understanding, acceptance, and love. 1 year later, I stood at the window of my office, looking out at the Boston skyline bathed in autumn sunlight. The headquarters of Catherine Arts, renamed in Mom's honor, occupied a beautifully renovated historic building in the South End Arts District. The space reflected my vision, open creative with gallery walls, showcasing work from emerging artists we supported. The transition hadn't been easy. During my first weeks as CEO, several executives resigned, uncomfortable with reporting to someone they viewed as inexperienced. Marcus Williams, true to Mom's faith in him, stayed to guide me through the initial challenges. His knowledge proved invaluable as I learned to navigate board meetings, financial statements, and corporate strategy. I made mistakes, certainly. An ill-conceived digital platform launch had to be scrapped after significant investment. A talented but volatile creative director nearly walked away with our best designers. But with each setback came learning, and gradually I found my footing. My background in graphic design and digital media, once dismissed by Dad as impractical, proved to be exactly what the company needed to evolve in the changing marketplace. We expanded from traditional art publishing into online education, virtual galleries, and creative services for businesses seeking authentic artistic content. Most satisfying was establishing the Catherine Andrews Foundation, allocating 10% of our profits to support young artists through scholarships, residency programs, and small business grants. The old family mansion which I purchased from Allison, who was all too happy to liquidate Dad's sentimental assets, was transformed into a small museum and educational space. A knock at my door interrupted my reflections. My assistant Jane entered with a steaming cup of tea. "Your 3 o'clock canceled," she said, placing the cup on my desk, "and this came for you by courier." She handed me a cream-colored envelope with European postage. I immediately recognized the handwriting. "Thank you, Jane. Could you reschedule the Miller meeting for next week?" After she left, I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter on hotel stationery from Milan, Italy. "Lydia, I've started this letter a dozen times over the past months. Pride kept me from finishing it, but recent events have forced me to reassess many things. You may have heard that I left Blackstone Financial under difficult circumstances. What the press didn't report was that I was asked to resign following an internal investigation. The pressure to perform to prove I was worthy of Dad's legacy led me to make compromises I never thought I would. The details aren't important now. What matters is that I've spent the past 6 months traveling through Europe, ostensibly networking, but really just avoiding the mess I left behind. Last week, I visited a small gallery in Florence and saw an exhibition sponsored by the Catherine Andrews Foundation. Seeing Mom's name alongside quotes about nurturing creativity rather than controlling it was a wake-up call. I won't pretend one letter erases years of competition and resentment. I won't claim to suddenly understand or appreciate your artistic path, but I can acknowledge that I've been unfair and often cruel. Mom always said we were more alike than different, both stubborn, both determined to prove ourselves. Perhaps she was right. I'm returning to Boston next month. If you're willing, I'd like to meet, not as business rivals or even as the children of Richard and Catherine Andrews, but simply as 2 women finding their own ways forward. Allison. I read the letter twice, emotions swirling. The Allison I knew would never admit weakness or mistake. This vulnerability was entirely new territory. A quick online search confirmed what her letter had hinted at. Allison had indeed left her prestigious position following rumors of ethical breaches. Dad's empire, which she had inherited with such triumph, was now partly dismantled with key divisions sold off to competitors. I placed the letter on my desk and touched Mom's locket, which I wore daily. Inside was now a new photo. Mom on one side and on the other, a picture of the first Catherine Arts Scholarship recipients. A legacy continued but reimagined. The past year had taught me that success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about being true to myself and the values Mom had instilled. I'd stopped measuring my worth by Allison's or Dad's standards, finding confidence in building something meaningful my own way. Would meeting with Allison reopen old wounds? Perhaps. But it might also be the beginning of something neither of us could have imagined a year ago. I picked up my phone and dictated a brief response. "I'll be here when you return. Some conversations are long overdue." As I returned to the window watching the late afternoon light gild the city, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Mom's secret inheritance had given me financial security, yes, but the true gift was the freedom to define success on my own terms, to create beauty and opportunity rather than simply accumulate wealth and power. Dad's will had declared me unworthy, but Mom's faith had proven stronger than his rejection. In the end, it wasn't about the money at all, but about understanding that true inheritance isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in values and purpose, in the courage to forge your own path, even when others doubt you. I wear Mom's locket every day, not as a reminder of wealth or status, but as a symbol of what truly matters. The love that sees us, clearly believes in our unique gifts, and gives us the strength to become who we were always meant to be. So what about you? Has someone in your life believed in you when others doubted? Or have you received an unexpected gift that changed your path? Share your story in the comments below. And if my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes our greatest strength comes from those who love us enough to help us be true to ourselves. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, the most valuable inheritance isn't always what's written in a will. It's the lessons we carry in our hearts.